Hello, friends. Welcome back to another brand new edition of the Lovecast with Jamal podcast. I am your host, Jamal Javanji. You're listening to episode 176, which is going to be entitled Your Relationship with Self Determines Your Health. Again, episode 176, which we're going to call Your Relationship with Self Determines Your Health. Guys, Happy New Year. It's 2023 at the time of this recording. It's just we're in the first full week here of January, and I'm super excited to be back on the show with you. We've taken a little break for the holidays, but we're getting back into the swing of things for the new year. Have some great episodes planned for you, so I'm really excited. Thank you for tuning back in. Whether you're a new listener or a returning listener, just want to say welcome. Glad you're here. I always like to get to know the listeners and people who are listening. So if you'd like to drop me a line, please feel free to shoot me an email, jamal@jamaljavanji.com. It's my first name, Jamal, at my first and last name.com. So jamal@jamaljavanji.com. Let me know you're listening, where you're listening from. Always great to hear from the listeners. And as we get into this new year, we have some really exciting episodes planned for the weeks and the months ahead. And you will, if you are subscribed to the podcast, you will be notified every time we post a new show. If you're listening to this, but you have not subscribed to the show, let me just encourage you to do that. You can just hit this little subscribe button. If you're listening on, iTunes or Apple Podcasts or Spotify or however you're listening to this, just hit subscribe. And if you would like to help support the show, you can, real easy, free way to do that. It takes just a few seconds. You can just leave us a rating and review. That really goes a long way to helping the podcast grow and get visibility. So if you haven't done that yet, let me encourage you to do that. So I want to jump right in to today's guest. Today's guest is she's doing some great work. Her name is Magic Barclay. She's very aptly named Magic Barclay. She's actually a living example. A lot of people would call her life is magic, but she's overcome some tremendous difficulties throughout her life, and has really become an example of what's possible when it comes to how reframing or reshaping your relationship with self can actually dramatically improve your physical health. And Magic has been through quite the journey. She's, I'm not going to tell her story. I'll let her tell it. She went through a lot of struggle in her life, a lot of abuse. She's been the single mother of two for the past 10 years. But in that time, she has really, been experienced to a roller coaster of events. I mean, she's experienced cancer. She has survived cancer. She beat it in that sense. She got to the root of it. She has had Lyme disease. She's had a stroke, diabetes, a heart attack. She's a hypoxia survivor. I mean, she came out of morbid obesity. She's had so many health challenges, and she's overcome them all, and by addressing and getting to the root of that, which is the relationship with self. Magic she's a Mould Toxicity Master Practitioner. Just a little bit about her work. She's an expert in PNEI, which is Neuro Endo Immunology, in regards to trauma. And we'll talk a little more about that in the show. She is an advanced practitioner in innate immunity and functional health solutions. She's also a practitioner of Lymphatic Mojo and CMLD, which is complex manual lymphatic drainage. She has authored about 4 books, and she's a very sought-after speaker and healthcare worker. So much we could say about Magic, but she has been through a lot and is doing tremendous work in Australia, is where she lives and practices her profession. So I stumbled on Magic last year and heard a little bit about her and her story, and I knew I wanted her to have her on the show. And so she was gracious enough to come on the show and talk about her story, which is just fantastic. So let me just encourage you. I don't care who you are. It's the beginning of a new year. All of us can really move deeper into addressing root issues in our life that all, as you'll hear in this story, have the roots in our relationship with self. But also I would love for you to just consider what's possible when you start to address the root issues of our health, which is ultimately our relationship with self. But I want you to just hear how this can affect the physical body, chronic illness, how this plays into it. I just wanted you to hear from Magic's story, and it's a good one. So let me encourage you to dig in, to listen carefully, and listen for where the application comes in regards to your own life. Okay, without further ado, here is my conversation with Magic. Hello, friends. Welcome to another edition of the Lovecast. We are in for a treat today. I'm sitting across the world, actually, but sitting across the proverbial podcasting table with a fantastic human being doing great work in the world. And as you know from the introduction, but Magic Barclay, is that right? Magic Barclay? Did I pronounce that right?
That's correct.
Yes. Welcome to the Lovecast. So glad that you're here.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. And so you are in Australia, as we can hear from your fantastic accent.
My Aussie accent. Yeah.
Yes. I love it. I think it's a great accent. I'm sure you hear that a lot from talking to Americans, but Australian accents are, to me, they're one of the epic accents in the world. Can you talk a little bit about the nature of your childhood and the family you came out of, and what was that like for you?
Sure. Well, my parents actually got divorced when I was 3. They were two personalities that just didn't fit with each other, to put it nicely. I don't know who was at fault, and I really don't care. But as a kid at 3 with an older brother who was 8 at the time, it was a little bit tough. I was kind of the carer for my brother. I would sort things out. He's on the autism spectrum, but no one knew it back then. But, I was kind of the tough little aunt following him, making sure everything's sorted out. And for a number of years, we were the football between the parents. We were dragged to access visits. We were told, don't do that because she does that, or don't do that because he does that. Don't be disgusting like your mother. Don't be a pig like your father. And that takes a toll. So you kind of have to forge your own path as a child. So going into my teen years, I became quite self-destructive. I didn't have a relationship with myself because I'd never seen a proper relationship apart from the one between my brother and I. And I became really super self-destructive early teens.
Wow. Okay. When you thank you for sharing, by the way. So basically what I'm hearing you say is because of the nature of your parents' divorce, how they interacted, and how they would pit, kind of put you guys in the middle, you and your brother in the middle of their dispute. How did that affect you as far as belonging and survival? Like, how did you navigate that because I would imagine you spent time with both parents.
Yeah, great question. Belonging didn't exist. Like, it really didn't exist. I found it really hard to make friendships and keep them. I found it really hard to know where I was, where I stood. I didn't trust either parent. And, for a little while I got kind of brainwashed by one against the other, and then it flipped, and then I got brainwashed by the other against the first one. And so I was just realizing that I was the meat in the sandwich, so to speak, and meat doesn't matter. You always worry about what type of bread you've got when you have a sandwich. The meat's just something that happens. It's whatever's in the fridge. And that's exactly what I felt like.
So I would imagine that it developed just a perception, maybe uneven, unconscious, like it doesn't matter. My life doesn't matter. Just kind of you're tolerated. You're kind of bait for each one of your parents. But yeah, it had to be really, really difficult to navigate that.
It was. And, the things that people deal with, the I'm not good enough, the I don't matters, the no one will miss me kind of thoughts that a lot of the population suffer from, and as coaches we have to deal with, that was really an early onset thing for me because I didn't matter. And, I knew I wasn't enough. And so that was really solidified early on. Okay.
And so by the time you get to your teenage years, you're moving into self-destructive behavior. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I became quite promiscuous. I was an alcoholic by the time I was 15. I just had no plan apart from a good time today, and if tomorrow doesn't happen, so be it. I started dating musicians who were, 10 to 15 years older than me, sometimes a bit more. And, I just was out for the good time, not the long time. And it was all about self-gratification. So I feel good today. That's what matters. And, I didn't see anything wrong with that back then. I was still a child, hadn't had a proper childhood. And so that's what I thought was okay. And, that was the 80s going into the 90s here in Australia. And the 80s scene in Australia was all about the colour and the fun and the music and the alcohol and, having a good time. And so I adopted that quite early.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing. And so this led you, and I know part of your story is that this led to things like binge drinking, alcoholism, eating disorders. So at what point just in your journey did you realize, I think I have a problem here. Like, I think this is getting out of hand. When did you become slightly conscious of that?
Look, amazingly, I survived. And when I was 21, I was working in a pub, and we had an airline here called Compass at the time. Okay. And they used to do mystery flights. So you'd rock up to the airport and they'd blindfold you and, you'd buy your ticket. You don't know where you're going, and they never announce where you're going. And when you land, it's a mystery, and you just take a bag of whatever for whatever happens. Well, I boarded one of those and I was gone for 3 days and I still don't know where I went. I'm now 50, folks. So I still do not know where I was for 3 days on my 21st.
That's amazing.
Bad.
But that was actually an airline. They would take you, the whole marketing of that was, hey, we're going to take you and you're not going to know where you're going. That's incredible. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it was amazing. Fun.
But you went for 3 days and obviously lots of alcohol involved. You had no idea.
No idea. I woke up back in my house in Adelaide with a different alcoholic drink right next to me, a Compass tag on my bag, and I was like, oh, gee, I hope that was fun because I don't know.
That's a snapshot of the kind of just what you were, the nature of the alcoholism and what you were experiencing.
The depth of my behavior. And so that still wasn't a wake-up call. So years later, I got involved in motor racing. And, of course, I had to stop drinking to be able to race my car. So I was still drinking, but not as much. I still had an eating disorder, so I had anorexia, but I didn't realize I had it. I just thought, well, I'm just incredibly thin. And to give the listeners an idea, I look like olive oil from Popeye. So I'm quite large up top, but the rest of me was really, really thin. And, I met my ex-husband while I was racing, and very quickly having someone actually pay attention to me, the wrong attention because he ended up being not the right person for me. And but having someone pay attention to me, we kind of had a whirlwind thing, got married, and before I knew it, I was pregnant. So the moment I saw that pregnancy test, I had to start eating and I had to stop drinking. And so that was the catalyst for change.
Unbelievable. Okay, so wow. So you get into this relationship, get married, get pregnant, and all the things the substances that you had turned to kind of medicate and numb the trauma, the pain of feeling not good enough, not like you don't belong, all of those things, you had to stop almost cold turkey, no drinking.
Yeah, 100% cold turkey.
So what happened with that? I mean, because that usually is a recipe for things coming to the surface, explosive, emotions. I mean, how did that manifest for you when you stopped?
Well, for me, that manifested, a number of ways. So I was pregnant. I had no intention of being pregnant, but, I saw this as an opportunity to do the opposite of what my parents did. I could give life to this little person and I could be the best mum ever because I'd never had that. I wanted to be the opposite. So, I read all the books and I looked after the baby and, he grew very healthily and happily. And I didn't have a relationship with my husband though, because he was getting jealous about me. So I was hothousing my belly. I was talking to my belly, reading to it, singing to it, playing music with headphones on it and, the whole thing. And he really resented how much time I was putting into this baby that wasn't even born yet. And so that was my relationship, was still down the tubes. But eating-wise, because I hadn't eaten properly for years and years, like my go-to pre-getting pregnant was cook one meal in a week and just graze off that all week. And coffee and champagne were my liquids. I was severely dehydrated most of the time because I didn't drink water and, got a fruit or a vegetable only if it was in that one meal a week.
Wow.
And so all of a sudden I had to eat for this baby. So I went from 45 kilos, which I'm not sure what that is in pounds, I think about 90 pounds, to post-baby 144 kilos. So, from 90 pounds to about 290 pounds, that was a big change for my body.
Sure.
And I developed things like gestational diabetes and liver issues and, the whole thing. So I really didn't have a great starting point.
Wow. Amazing. So really most of your life malnourished, or at least for your adult life, not getting what your body needs. And then all of a sudden you're faced with, I have to eat, but then having no sense of regulation because of the trauma. There was an attempt to fill the void, I would imagine, right? To fill that, to satiate that. Is that right?
Totally. So, with the diabetes, I was told to eat lots of carbs, eat potato, eat rice, eat bread. And I had never eaten that stuff before. So when you put really carb-heavy foods like that into a system that has had virtually nothing for the past 10, 15 years, you're going to create some problems. So I became super morbidly obese. And, when my baby was born, his feet did not touch the ground for the first year of his life.
Interesting.
Because I just wanted to hold him and carry him and really bond with him. But there was an issue because I was like the size of the blueberry girl in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And then strapping a baby to my chest as well. Like, things weren't easy, but I still did it because that was my highest value, was my baby. And I started seeing behaviors in him as he grew up. And a very smart kid, also on the spectrum. So he's virtually my brother, but in a different person. Funny how that happens. And I started seeing behaviors in him, and he would cry and carry on. So I decided I better have another baby, because maybe his behaviors are because he's the only child. And here I was, super morbidly obese and pregnant again. And, not healthy again. So the same thing repeated. And that pushed my relationship further apart. We split up for a few months after the second one was born and got back together because I didn't want my kids to be from a broken marriage, because I was, and I knew what that was like. So no matter how bad things got, I was going to stay for my kids. Now, this comes back to that no relationship with self. This is a recurring thing. I don't matter. I'm not worthy. These kids are all that matter. They need two parents. I'm going to stick it out. So I did.
Wow. And how did, and thank you for sharing. I know, so with your ex-husband, it kind of sounds like if he had any, I know, you described him as a having narcissistic traits. So this idea, well, obviously with dealing with the narcissist, there's nobody else exists except for self, right? In that sense, but not in a healthy way. It's a sense of, it's a taking. And so any kind of attention or focus that's not on him, I would imagine,
felt like for him abandonment. And so
Totally.
therefore that, so then you become then the enemy that is reminding him of his abandonment issues or that deep seated. So how did that manifest in the relationship, like in the day in, day out relationship? What did you see manifest from that?
Yeah, look, the day in, day out relationship. And remember, listeners, I didn't know what a relationship was. Like, I had no idea what a marriage should look like because my parents were just hopeless in that arena. And so day to day, he would call me 20 to 30 times a day. What are you doing now? Like, he'd be at work and he'd phone me. What are you doing now? Where have you been? How long are you going to be out for? And I could be, up to my elbows in a pooey nappy because I had two little ones 2 years apart. And, I'd have to stop everything I was doing and quickly wipe my hands and quickly get to the phone because I would be berated if I wasn't. And house had to be perfectly clean all the time. I didn't have a name. So when he came home from work, it would be, hello kids, hello dogs, hello cats, what's for dinner? So what's for dinner became my name. And so I had no sense that this was right or wrong. Just it was what it was. It later developed into violence, physical violence and emotional violence. And, all through this, my kids were watching the whole thing. Now, remember, I was only there so my kids could have two parents.
Right.
And the kids would see the whole thing and they could see that I wasn't healthy at the same time. So the catalyst for change of my body was when my eldest, who was 5 at the time, started crying. I picked him up from school. He was crying. And I said, what's wrong? And he said, I just want to hug you like the other kids can hug their mummies. But you're too fat, Mum. I just can't reach. And so all of a sudden I realised I had been in my own little bubble thinking about survival and not thinking about my health and not thinking what that meant for the kids. And maybe I could survive better if I was healthier. So, that was a big moment.
Fascinating. So for you, becoming health conscious, just that moment when your 5-year-old child kind of points you back to, hey, basically it was a wake up call for you to take a look at your own health. But that was the doorway. It sounds like health was the doorway for inner healing for you to start to pay attention to your, just the significance of your being and the need for wholeness.
Totally. Right? So, my health didn't matter to me before that. But when he said, I just want to hug you, I realized it was like that light bulb moment. Some people need a brick to fall on the head. Well, that was the first brick for me. And, it was just that moment of what I'm doing isn't sustainable. And if I can ever find a way out of this situation, I can't do it at 144 kilos or 290 pounds. I can't run from the situation because I can barely make it to the door.
Sure. Totally. So what happened next? Was that the catalyst for you getting out of that relationship, or what was the catalyst?
No, I still in my mind needed to stay married because the kids still needed two parents. So it actually went on for a few years. I threw myself into my fitness. I actually opened a gym. Wow. I did everything I could to change my reality and have some autonomy. I didn't know about, holistic health back then. I just thought, well, the doctors have been telling me for ages, eat less, move more, so that's what I'll do. And so I did that. And then the kids were, they were 14 and 12 at the time of the big change in our lives. Actually, go back a year, 13 and 11, and they said to me, we're not safe here. He's hitting us when you're not home. He's yelling at us. He's breaking our Lego. He's threatening to throw our laptops into the bin. We're not safe. So I sold the gym. I closed it up, sold everything in it, went bankrupt, voluntarily just to get the heck out of there. And that kind of carried on for about 9 or 10 months. So almost a year later, we left. The kids and the pets, and I ran away.
Just packed up in the car, drove off.
Yeah. Packed everything up, left, And, that was a big thing for me. And I
Sure.
kept saying to the kids, are you okay? Oh, we would have been okay 5 years ago if we left. Why didn't we leave? And I said, because you need a mum and you need a dad. And my eldest is very switched on. And he turned around and he said, we haven't ever had a dad. He's never been interested in us unless it was to get at you.
Interesting.
And I went, oh, wow, history repeats itself. And I didn't see it,
It's amazing. Amazing. Your child, your firstborn, it sounds like just an ability to see, right? To kind of see and call out clarity and reality in a way that you can hear. Amazing. What a beautiful gift that was.
It is. And he was the one that said, Mum, take a minute and look around.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, we were all sleeping on a mattress in my younger son's bedroom, huddled up together, because I'd spent the past few years living on the couch. I couldn't even sleep in my own bed anymore. It was that bad. And yet something in my mind said, you have to stay to give these kids two parents.
Amazing.
And so my eldest said, have a look at what my little brother's made, what he carries around the house when you're not here to protect us. And my youngest had actually gone outside and gotten a stick and found a rock and sharpened the edge of the rock and sticky taped the rock to the end of the stick. He was carrying around a homemade axe.
To protect himself from his dad.
Yeah.
So that the level of kind of trauma, fight or flight that they were in, it's a good indicator or picture of that. Amazing.
Yep.
Wow. So that was very clearly a wake up call for you. And you, I can't imagine how difficult that must have been. I know it had to be extremely difficult, to a lot of unknowns to pack up and just to leave, but you did it.
I did. I was on autopilot though, so it wasn't really a conscious thing, and I still had no idea what this meant for my health. So that next brick fell on me pretty shortly after.
I wanted to ask you about that because I know so your health, obviously when you're living in that level of trauma and resistance, I mean, that's got to go somewhere, right? So that energy is obviously inside the body, wreaking havoc. How did that start to manifest for you in regards to chronic disease and health issues?
Great question. Well, it really manifested very quickly. So once we got to a safe place, we found a house that was a secret location and did the whole thing. All of a sudden, I felt like a truck had hit me. I was sleeping 22 hours a day. I couldn't even stand up to cook the kids' dinner. So one of them would bring me a dining chair and I'd sit on that to cook. And I was just completely exhausted and I realized something was really wrong. So I went to a GP and I'd been through the whole marriage telling our local GP, something's wrong, I don't feel great. And they told me I had Munchausen's and I'm an attention seeker and, XYZ. So I had been dismissed by the medical fraternity for years. But I finally went to a GP where we moved. And I said, look, something's wrong. This is what's happening. I'm really tired. I feel like I've got the flu all the time. Like everything's hurting. What's going on? I'm getting bigger. At that stage, had lost half my body weight. It was starting to come back. And I went, well, I'm not doing anything less. I'm still going to the gym, even though I can't stay awake. I'm still managing, albeit just managing. And I'm still not eating a heap. So what's going on? And he said, how long have you been under stress for? And I thought, well, since I was 3.
Wow.
And he said, you've got a disease called Cushing's disease, your adrenals. So they're the organs that control your stress output and input. They're gone kablooey. That's it. They've had it.
When you're in fight or flight mode, constantly under threat, your low-level adrenaline's running, your adrenal glands are responding to that. So they were just shot, right? Just completely. Yep. And for the first time, you had a break, right? I think it's interesting that when you get out of fight or flight, because you got away from the danger when you left the relationship, it's almost like your body says, okay, let's take a breather and let's deal with the wreckage. Like it's like a tornado's come through. When the tornado's coming through, you just have to hunker down, and you've been hunkering down since 3. But finally, it's almost like the tornado has passed. Now let's assess the damage. And that's kind of what your body was doing. Interesting.
Totally. And, like after a tornado, you can walk through and there'll be like one tree and it's perfectly pristine and healthy and green. And you look around and you go, well, the rest of it looks like the apocalypse. How did this one tree survive? Well, that one tree was the rest of me that was still alive.
Okay. Can you talk about what was that tree for you?
Yep. So that tree for me was my will. It was my will to live. And it was those kids that were keeping me alive. If they weren't there, I would say I would have been dead long ago.
Sure.
They were my tree. They were there.
And there was enough energy in that tree, so to speak, just the care to know that you had to show up for your children because there was nobody else.
Exactly.
And there was enough energy. So it's interesting. I've talked about this before on this podcast, but I always say there's really, my understanding is there's three main components to the human expression. We have a physical body, mental body, and an energy body. But when the energy body is kind of that life force that supplies your physical essence. And for you, because the physical was so depleted, the only life force essence was, I have to show up for my children. And that was supplying your body, basically life support to keep your body alive.
Yep, 100%.
Amazing.
So I started talking to this doctor and he said, look, I think it's Cushing's, but let's do some tests.
Okay.
And so what we found was that I had cancer. And the cancer had been growing for quite a while. So they didn't think it was particularly bad. And then, a few tests later, he said, look, at this stage, I'm going through the court system in Australia. So my ex had put me through every level of court system there was. And he was fighting everything for so long. And he was using the kids as the go-between. Again, history repeating itself. So he was going, totally. I am going to take those kids away from you because that's the only thing that matters. And he did that for a reason because he wanted me to say, you can have the money and the cars and the house and everything. I just want to keep these kids safe. And I fell for it. Totally 100% fell for it. I did get the kids. I got a legal bill and he got everything else. So this was all going on. And unfortunately, the court system here said, well, we can deem you an unfit mother if you don't get this cancer taken care of. So I had to have the surgery. I didn't have a choice.
Unbelievable. Yeah. So that it was basically court mandated medical procedure that you had to take care of. Well,
it wasn't really mandated. It was just highly suggested.
Yes. Yeah. With your kids dangling.
Yes. Kids on the chain dangling in front of me. Yeah.
Very interesting. So they forced you to do the traditional kind of cancer treatment route. So, may I ask what type of cancer did you have?
So I had stage 4 thyroid cancer. So it had spread to my lymph nodes. I wanted to treat it naturally. Stage 4. Yep. So we're getting there. And I wanted to treat it naturally. I had started delving into all things natural health at that stage.
Sure. And
we were using essential oils in the home and I'd cut out all toxins in the home and, the whole thing. And, I had to have this surgery, arm twisted behind my back. So I did that, but I said, I'm not doing chemo or radiation. That's where I'm going to draw the line. Let's negotiate this. Yes, I'll have the surgery. Now looking back, I wish I hadn't. And so I did. I had the surgery. And when I came out of surgery, my GP saw me like the week after I got home and he goes, oh, you know how it was just one nodule on your thyroid? And I said, yeah. He goes, well, it wasn't. It was the whole back of the thyroid. And so they took the whole thing out. And so they destroyed a few other organs. They damaged my neck in the process. It wasn't a great surgery. It was almost like I attracted the worst surgeon possible. So,
wow. Okay.
But, I did what I put out to the world, I got back and I didn't think anything of myself. So, of course, I got the most inept surgeon there was. And so here I was, post-surgery. I'd never had a painkiller, for the past 10 years. I was on painkillers. So I was doing things like putting the kettle in the fridge and, really strange stuff, going out with one sock on and just my head was not there. And so I said to the kids, look, let's go away for a few days. I need to go away. So we travelled north to a beautiful place called Port Macquarie. We spent a few days there, and I got bitten by a tick while we were there. And so I got Lyme disease, which was great. All of a sudden I felt like I did when I had the cancer again, you know.
Oh. Wow. Unbelievable. So just one thing after another. And by the time, so your children at this point are what, 15, 16 years old, teenage?
Yeah. Yeah.
And are they aware to the full extent of how serious your health condition is with cancer? And
yeah, well, when I had the cancer, I actually had to tell them, here's my will. Here's where all the documents are. Here's my, you know, my funeral insurance. I'd started that. Here's who gets the dogs. Here's who gets the cats. Here's who gets you. Sell everything in the house because mummy won't be here.
So they and I'm sure they were dealing with that real prospect of losing you, which was their whole world. And so at what point did you feel like you began to get a handle on your health?
Yeah, well, it was when I started treating the Lyme. So I had met heaps of people in the natural health realm here in Australia and studied a whole lot of people overseas. And, you know, so I started studying the Lyme. I started studying the thyroid issues because I was on toxic medication for that. And so I found a more natural route for the thyroid med and told my doctor about it. And he goes, well, I've never heard of this, but hey, if you've researched it, it's your body, let's give it a go. And so I got everything into remission, which was great. And then I went...
Which I find, by the way, I find to be fascinating that your research, what you did, got everything in remission and your doctor went along with you.
He did. He was a great doctor. And he's now no longer a doctor. He's left that world because of everything going on. And and he said, well, if you've done the study, and I produced him all the studies, all the PubMed, all the Lancet Journal, everything on everything, and gave him all the reference material that I'd found. And he said, well, it's your body. Let's give it a go.
Like, which basically means you're the doctor in practice.
Yeah, I became the doctor. Yeah.
You became the doctor in practice, which is so interesting that we look to this entire industry for wellness. And oftentimes the best thing they can do typically in the Western kind of medical apparatuses, if they just get out of the way, then they can help facilitate healing, which is really interesting. So I find that anyway, your story is fascinating. And it's also I hear it so often when it comes to people who take control of their health. The best case scenario is that they're quote unquote Western trained physicians. Best case scenario is they get out of the way. They don't.
And he did. And that was great. Yeah, so amazing. I realized that exact point. Mm-hmm. And so I said to myself at that point, well, I've done all this research and I've managed to fix my own issues. So there's still a few ongoing because, you know, what caused cancer, I still didn't know. And so I thought I can do this for a living. If I can do it for me, I can do it for other people. Absolutely. So I threw myself into my study and I really looked at, I guess, what I'm doing now, which is finding root cause. Okay. And in doing that, I did find what caused the cancer.
I was going to ask you, what was that? What was the root of that cancer for you?
Well, there were a couple of things. So first of all was the extremely high cortisol that I was running on all the time.
And cortisol being a stress hormone, right?
Stress hormone, but also it's a sugar. Now, through the cancer and remember through my pregnancies, I'd been told I had one form or other of diabetes. Okay. Well, cortisol is a sugar. So when that's flooding your system, of course you become insulin resistant because, you know, your insulin receptors are going, well, there's so much sugar in the body. It's not particularly glucose. For me, it was cortisol.
Cortisol.
So, yeah. So that was a big thing, finding that. And then I found out about a virus. Now, I know that's a dirty word these days, but to your listeners, no pathogen. So a pathogen is a virus, a fungus, or a bacteria, the big three. And no pathogen should be so feared that we stop living our lives. I found out I had a virus called Epstein-Barr. So for people in the US, that's mononucleosis. For people here, it's called glandular fever.
And it's a very common virus. I want to just kind of go back to something you just said, just because I think I'd love for people to really hear it. And because it's obviously we've lived in the last couple of years of a heightened fear of viruses, but nobody should be, say that again, there is no virus in existence that should occupy our fear-based imagination to the point where we stop living our life.
Exactly. We live with viruses and bacteria and fungus every day. And these big three pathogens have a really symbiotic relationship. So viruses eat bacteria and fungus, bacteria eat viruses and fungus eat viruses and bacteria. And they live in us all the time. They're not always the bad guys. Okay, so they're just cells. That's all they are, is cells.
It's an ecosystem.
Yep.
At the level of, yep.
But if you take one out by using, say, antibacterial sanitizers all the time, you mentioned the past couple of years about a virus. Why are we using antibacterial sanitizers when we're scared of a virus as a collective? Because nobody
thinks about that.
Exactly. Well, I do. We're taking out that bacteria that can actually keep a virus in check.
100%. I love what you're saying. You know, now it's fashionable today. Every time you go into a store or establishment, they have the antibacterial sanitizers. I never use them for that very reason. Because number one, we know this in the medical community. It is known that bacteria are essential. And that's not only that, the viruses and bacteria, what are being called viruses, are fundamentally different than bacteria. And so if quote unquote we are responding to a viral outbreak, why would we be turning to antibacterial solutions, which make no sense in the first place? Just from a medical standpoint, it makes no sense.
Exactly.
But then we're wiping out bacteria, which is creating the imbalance. So it's just, you see it and you go, such the behaviors that we're indulging in our world is like this. If people just understood the basics of how the body works and how health works, we would not fall for any of this. This is crazy.
Exactly. And look, you know, wherever your listeners are on the spectrum of believing what's going on or not, this is the fundamentals that these big three, viruses, bacteria, and fungus, all help us. Yes, they can hinder us. I'm not saying things like Epstein-Barr or what's going on at the moment are good. They're not. But there are some that help us, right? So when we take one of those out of the equation, as you said, we're creating an imbalance, and that's going to have issues. And just to give you an idea of one of those issues, I was recently at a store that grows medicinal plants. And I was there doing shopping for my family and, you know, I'm planting these plants. And a lady came in and asked the girl behind the counter, "Have you got anything to help me sleep? I'm traveling." So she's traveling with her husband. She's a grey nomad, as we call them here in Australia. And, you know, going around Australia in a caravan. Good on her, but she's having sleeping issues. And I'm there minding my own business till I can't. And I said, "Are you using a lot of hand sanitizer?" She goes, "Oh, of course, it's everywhere." I said, "Well, perhaps stop using that." She goes, "Why?" And I said, "Because there's bacteria in your gut, right, that create neurotransmitters like serotonin, and from that 100%. Is developed melatonin, which helps you sleep at night. So that comes from bacteria in the gut. But you're using antibacterials every day, and that's destroying it, going through your skin and into your system, destroying your gut bacteria."
Yep.
She goes, "Oh, simple. What do I do?" So I said, use some essential oils. So for your listeners, essential oils, you know, it may seem a bit hippie and a bit out there, but they're antimicrobial. So they take out fungus, bacteria, and viruses, but the bad ones. And they're so microscopic, essential oils, that they can cross your blood-brain barrier and clean up the mess there, and they only take out the bad guys.
It's amazing. And, you know, it's the approach should be, and again, nature has a way of keeping things in balance, right? And that's what we're struggling with, is we're struggling with things getting out of balance. But I always say, if you introduce a toxin, thinking that the toxin is small enough to not harm you, but great enough to harm this organism. Toxins are toxins. It's still harmful to life, right? So you may not drop dead like a, let's say, use pesticide or something. You may not drop dead like the bug out there, but you're ingesting that same poison toxin. So it's antibacterial, whatever it is, like that it's destroying life. That thing, whatever that substance is actually destroying life. And you are that life, by the way. You're a part of that life. We're not separate. If you look at soil, good soil has an abundance of it. There's a whole ecosystem, trillions of bacteria and fungi and viruses and all these things, what we're calling viruses. All this stuff is made up of in the actual soil. So when we use, and there's so many studies out now, and we're starting to realize by using these synthetic poisons to get rid of certain, insects or bugs or different things, we're literally murdering the ecosystem in the soil, which is degrading everything, our food quality, our ability to have nutrition, which then degrades the quality of our health. And it's like, there's consequences for substances that destroy life, no matter how. None of them are harmless to life, including the water, that we're drinking, and chlorination and all of these things that are, it's like you're ingesting it maybe at a low level so you don't drop dead immediately, but that's having an effect on you. It's like drinking poison slowly for years. Really, really fascinating. So I'm glad you're bringing attention to that. Amazing that you were able to help this woman. Great example of, hey, you're using hand sanitizer. It's killing your gut flora, which is affecting your melatonin, which is why you can't sleep. And it just simple, that most medical professionals would never even have that awareness.
Totally. And so the other thing that she was saying while we were talking was, I'm so crabby because I'm tired, I'm cranky, and, we're trying to enjoy this trip and I can't seem to enjoy it as much as I wanted to. So it was having this flow-on effect. And, sooner or later, if she kept going, she would have gotten quite unwell because she's taking bacteria out, but she's also not making these neurotransmitters anymore. So she's not enjoying what she's doing. And certainly in my mind, if you're traveling around the country in a caravan to see the sights, you want to actually have a great experience doing that. So
sure.
she was taking out her enjoyment.
Sure. Full presence, energy, high energy. That's the way to live life. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely. Amazing. So this, for you, getting Lyme disease was a catalyst for you. You realized you have Epstein-Barr virus, which is quote unquote mono so for layman. For layman. So how did you begin to address that?
Easy. So I really looked at the systems of the body. And so after my cancer journey, I developed this kind of double chin that I've got going on. And I realized I had lymphatic issues. I didn't even know the lymphatic system existed. And I'd been in, fitness and health for quite a while. And so I looked at every system of the body and I saw that no system works alone. And I sought, a couple of great mentors who are still my mentors to this day. And they spoke of this. No system works alone. You cannot expect the lymphatic system or the immune system or the digestive system to work in isolation. It's not going to happen. So you can't heal in isolation either.
100%.
So I started using...
Everything's interconnected, by the way. That's kind of the idea. Okay. Yeah. We're not taught this. Obviously, we're taught, the way most medicine, you see a cardiologist to treat the heart issue, a neurologist to treat the brain, but they're almost treated as separate systems, but they're all interconnected.
Exactly. So I started using the theory of holism, which is based on the body as a whole. You are an ecosystem within an ecosystem. And, most mainstream medical is taught reductionism. So exactly what you said, let's treat, the cardiologist will treat the cardiovascular system and the endocrinologist will treat the hormonal system. And, the GP kind of knows a little bit about a lot of it, but not enough about any of it to actually not have to send you to a specialist, right?
Right.
So, I'm treating completely differently to mainstream. And so someone comes to me for example, with your sore knee. This is a great example. Sore knee. I've got a sore knee. Don't know what to do. Maybe I should go to a chiro or an osteo or, just get a massage or whatever. But the knee's not the problem. So immediately with a pain in a joint like that, I'm thinking lymphatics or I'm thinking circulatory, not skeletal. That's the last one I'm going to think of. So I'm going to look at what's causing the pain. Where's the pain coming from? Is this a response to a trauma? Is this a response to a pathogen? Is it a response to an oxalate? So an oxalate is a compound found in some foods, and if you are oxalate intolerant, it will actually deposit oxalates in your joints. So, for example, spinach and celery are oxalate-rich foods. So if someone comes to me with a sore knee, I'm going to look at, hey, when you eat celery, how do you feel? Or, do you ever order spinach with your big breakfast when you go out? And they go, oh, no, I can't stand the stuff. Right. Immediately, I'm thinking your body's trying to tell you something here. So is the sore knee just a sore knee? It's never.
Amazing. Very, very amazing. I want to ask you this question. What is the PNEI of trauma?
Oh, my favorite subject. So Dr. Gabor Mate, in his book, When the Body Says No, a brilliant book, everyone should read it. It should be a must read for every teenager and adult.
Dr. Mate?
Yep, Gabor Mate.
Gabor Mate, okay. When the Body Says No.
Yep. And when he, in this book, talks about the PNEI system, my ears pricked up and I went, that makes sense. So what it is P is the psycho, N is the neuro, E is endo, and I is immunology of trauma. So what it means is something that you're thinking or experiencing. Now that could be a thought, it could be a fear, whether it's, based or unbased fear. It could be a childhood experience. So we call that an ACE, adverse childhood experience, or an ACA, adverse childhood relationship experience, of which I had many.
Sure. That
then makes a threat, right? So your body sees a threat. So you have three sectors of your brain. At the base, you have your reptilian brain, which is that fight-flight system comes through there, and it's got to keep you safe. So when you walk into a room, you're immediately scanning, is that bookshelf going to fall on me? Is the roof holding up? You don't realize this is happening, but it happens. Is there someone hiding around the corner with an axe? No. Okay, great. I'm safe, or I'm not safe.
This is an unconscious kind of survival mechanism.
Completely. And it happens all the time.
All the time.
Right? When you have something in the past, the reptilian brain kicks it up to the limbic brain, which is the center of your brain. And that is your emotional brain. So something that happened when you were younger now makes something mean something. So there's a thought or there's a process going on, and it's all often completely subconscious. So you have no idea.
So this is the P, the psyche.
This is the P. So if this thought process, if this limbic reaction happens for long enough, it calls in the nervous system. So you can have the sympathetic nervous system, and that's your fight flight. So it's, you're constantly anxious and I'm looking around all the time and, jump at every sound, or it may not even be that obvious, but your nervous system sends messages through your body, right? So you can walk past a restaurant and you can smell something, and you can have a memory that your limbic system, the P, then tells your nervous system, last time you smelt this, you were in danger.
Yep.
So this message goes through your body, right? And then so that's the N, the neural system. And then your endocrine system kicks in because your nervous system says, last time this happened, you were in danger. I'm going to increase your temperature now. All of a sudden, and you're going to have all these hormones running around. And remember, one of those hormones is cortisol. And so you're going to have this, response so you can run from the danger.
Right.
So you get,
it's adrenal response, right?
Yeah, all hot, sweaty. Here comes your endocrine system jumping in. Now, this PNE happens long enough and repeatedly enough, your immune system kicks in, and your immune system says, wow, I've got all this cortisol, I've got, all of this going on, these bad thoughts and, neural responses, I've got pain responses. Body must be in danger. And this is the word that carries through all those systems. So the immune system says, you cannot die. I cannot let you die. So I'm going to create a reaction to all those things before me to keep you alive.
An overactive immune system, an aggressive immune response, right?
Yeah. So you get autoimmune.
So, and it's so interesting. Gosh, there's so much you're saying here, but with autoimmune, it's really interesting because danger is kind of the common thread that runs through, right?
Yeah.
Starting at the psyche, going to the nervous system, the endocrine then is responding, and then your immune system is fighting because it's oh my gosh, we're in danger. The last 2 years of this global pandemic that we've went through, forget the quote unquote virus for a second. The damage, the autoimmune issues that we're seeing now, I'm sure there's some other factors to this, but just from that, what you're saying here, the autoimmune issues that are exploding globally are off the charts. And how much of this is because we've introduced the psychological trauma that's just being blasted through, children. I mean, my wife's an educator. She works with children. I mean, the trauma at children just from the fear. Forget anything.
Well, just on the children, I don't think we've even begun to see the problems. So look at a child. And listeners, I don't mean to get, off track here, but this is really important that you, even if you don't agree with me, consider what I'm saying. A child is much like a gorilla, okay? So gorilla is closest relative to us in DNA. We share 95% of our DNA. Okay. If you smile at the wrong time at a gorilla, or you cover your face and they can't see your facial communication, they'll start beating their chest and carrying on at the zoo.
Interesting.
So a child is no different, especially a baby or a young child. If you are covering your face and they can't see because they don't understand English as a baby, right? So vocal communication, they can tell by the tone of your voice what you're trying to say, but they need to read your face. So what are we teaching our kids? Because they're not able to communicate, because we're not communicating because we're covering our face. So there's one thing. We look at what this has done to families. So here in Australia, especially where I am in Victoria, for 2.5 years, we weren't allowed to go and see our families. Weren't allowed to travel more than 5 kilometres. I'm not sure what that is in your distances there, but it's not very far.
Not very far, about maybe 10 miles or something.
Yeah, it's like a long walk. Like you're not even allowed to go past a long walk.
Unbelievable.
And we were only allowed outside for an hour a day to exercise, let alone we can't drive past 5Ks, right? So what has this done? It has cut off so much communication based on fear. And then we had mandates come in and we had, people losing their jobs and, their livelihoods. But jobs they'd been at for 20, 30 years, now all of a sudden they're less of a person because they didn't do something, right? So we've got people pitted against people. We've had people screaming at other people, go and get, something, I'm not going to say it, because if you don't, we can't all get back to normal life. Take a minute and think what that actually means. Read between the lines.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing here is your personal autonomy, your personal freedom, and that should be your highest value in life.
100%.
And this is coming from someone who gave away her autonomy and freedom for so many years because I lived for my brother and then I lived for my kids. And now I have some people in suits telling me I have to give it away again for people I don't even know. That's where I draw the line.
Sure, totally.
And so just, listeners, ask yourself, is the fear worth it? What am I actually losing? And how can people turn their own families away? All based on fear of a virus.
Yeah, it's not rational or logical in any way. So fascinating what you're sharing. And just to go back to a little bit to even just your own chronic disease with cancer. So the PNEI, I mean, so for you, the psyche, the psychology, the conscious and unconscious trauma you experience just from coming out of a family where you didn't matter, a perception was you didn't matter, your own, parents were involved in their own traumas and situations. So that neglect or abandonment that you experienced as a child then developed into your neurological system really kind of adapted to that. It was survival, fear, fight or flight, kind of that's what you were constantly in, which created an endocrine response, the E. So PNE, so now we're in the E.
So now my thyroid's gone kablooey and my adrenals,
totally. And cortisol is being secreted, which is a stress hormone, which, as you mentioned, creates sugar imbalance, and that creates a whole level of issues there, which eventually developed into cancer of the thyroid,
which was my immune response, amongst others. So once the cancer was sorted, I still had autoimmune issues.
Sure. Basically, the body's so inflamed that it's turning on itself. So by dealing with, so for you, there was, in which we haven't even got really into, but there was a whole like coming back to the truth, the what I call this a spiritual, and I know that word has baggage for a lot of people, but when I say spiritual, I simply mean beyond the physical. So by turning beyond the physical to the essence of your being, realizing or experiencing, I should say, not just intellectually, but at an experiential level, understanding the depth of your being, the significance of your being, how loved you are, how valuable you are at the core level, begins to turn off that trauma response.
Totally. And so I had to do a lot of work at that point and go, who am I? Yes. If you'd asked me, before that, like growing up, I was my brother's sister. That's who I was. And then, I was my kid's mother, and I was a wife, and then I was an ex-wife, and I was a friend, and I was a business owner and a boss. But who are you? That's who I am. No, that's not who I was. And I had to learn who I was because, through all my story, the one thing that was missing was relationship to self. I had the physical strength. I had the emotional strength to keep enduring, but I had no relationship with me. And that was a really big thing to have to learn. Sure. And, one tip for your listeners here is ask yourself, who am I? And write it down. And you will be scared and shocked and amazed and,
Totally. I have this practice I like to sometimes suggest to people. And say, before you go to bed at night, as you're laying in bed, make a list. People take their clothes off, before they get into bed. They take their jewelry off, take their watches and all that, and they put it maybe on the nightstand. You can actually picture yourself taking off your identities. Who am I? Well, I'm a mother, I'm a father, I'm a brother, I'm a coach, I'm whatever it is that you may say. These are all identities that you can take off for a moment and just picture yourself putting them to the side on a nightstand until you get to, okay, there's nothing left to take off. There's no temporary identity, because I'm not always going to be, I can say, well, I'm a spouse, but eventually there's coming a day when that's not going to be the case. One of us is going to pass. I can say I'm my physical body, right? But even my physical body, right? My physical body every 7 years or so, it's completely regenerated. So this body's dying constantly. So I haven't always had the same body. There's not one cell in my body now that was there at birth. So our body's constantly regenerating. So I'm not going to have this body forever. My mind is constantly being renewed and changed and developing. So the mind is temporary. So everything that we can say is, who am I? I can take off. And eventually you get to the point where there's nothing left to take off anymore. And now that state right there, whatever you're aware of there, that's just you. Can't be.
And so for me, that is, I am a soul that's connected to nature. I'm a soul that's connected to Father, Son, and Mother Earth. And again, I know that sounds hippie, but when you take off all those layers, that's what I am.
Just being itself. Yeah. And the relationship with that part of you, which is the totality of you actually, but that's the basis. That relationship is the basis for life itself, for every other relationship. So if there's a lack of relationship there, that lack of relationship will manifest in every other relationship or situation.
It will. And it's the dressings and the spin that we put on that essence that we put out to the world. But if you're not liking what you're seeing that you're putting out to the world, if that person you're putting out there is not the only person that you want to be stuck in a room with, then there's something wrong. And so I think what we've lost sight of the past few years is that person, that essence, that soul or that light or that energy or however you want to see it. If you can't be okay with what you're seeing, change it. Do something. And, being told to not see your family and being told to cover your face, being told to put something into your body and, all these things. If that doesn't sit right with you, listen to you.
Yes.
Because if you get sick from something that you are told to do, no one else is going to pick up the pieces. You have to.
100%. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. We have a mutual kind of family friend that went through the whole thing, was told what to do in certain situations. He's about 28, I think 27, 28 years old, and has had 2 massive brain hemorrhages and is, going to be in need of 24-hour care for the rest of his life. This is most people's understanding is a direct result of some medical interventions that he did that, went against his better judgment.
Exactly. And, just to your listeners, look, I don't want to get us taken off air or anything, but we've seen in history medical interventions gone wrong before, right? And we've screamed and we've jumped up and down and we've said, how could you do this? Well, the same thing is happening now. I have never before in my life seen so many ambulances here in Australia 100%. Traveling with lights with no sirens. Now, I'm not sure if it means the same thing over there in the US as it does here. That's not a good thing.
No.
That is not a good thing to see, and I'm seeing it every single day.
Totally.
And it's not because of a virus, because the virus has been here for a few years now. Okay? So we weren't seeing that 2-3 years ago. We're seeing it now.
Totally. And I can't tell you, just in my own small circle that I operate in, the number of people that have had sudden death drop, people, and I personally have never heard of as many people having cardiac events, strokes, blood clots, and sudden death. People just dropping dead without warning. And the explanation that's given to folks is, we don't know.
That's not good enough.
It's not good enough.
I come from a real science background here, right? So remember when I said that I wanted to change my thyroid meds and I researched how to fix the Lyme and how to fix cancer and things like that, or at least put them in remission. I approached my GP with studies, right, with science, real science, not science in inverted commas. If I couldn't find it on PubMed or Lancet, I wasn't going to use it. So ask yourself now, where is the science behind what is happening in your life? There isn't.
That's so good.
It's not there. It's non-existent.
Yeah. People just have to take.
Yeah, there's these I don't knows. That's not good enough. Science doesn't work on I don't know.
And we have to find the root cause. And I think it's just a matter of people taking responsibility for you can't outsource your health to anybody. You have to. And I think that's the aim of a true healthcare practitioner. I feel like would aim to empower people to take their own health into their hands, to become.
Exactly. And that's what my team does. So we're the conduits for your health. right? We're your health practitioners. But a practitioner has a practice. We are practicing because we don't know everything yet, okay? You are your own guru, as I think Tony Robbins says that, doesn't he? Because it's true. You're in charge of your health. My team can show you what we think the root cause is. We can show you the real science behind it, and we can give you an idea of what to do. We will give you a treatment program, but it is you learning the whole time. So when you finish working with us, you can go onto a maintenance program or not. As long as when you leave us, you are educated enough to understand how to identify what's going on. So when something else pops up, which it will, you don't stay healthy every day forever. Your body experiences stuff. So it has reactions that you can say, I need to get hold of the holistic natural health team, or the holistic natural health team taught me so much. I now know what I'm looking at. This is a system of the body that's triggering this system, that's triggering this system, and this is what it's presenting as. And so you don't go into a panic and you go, I've got this. I've totally got this.
So good. So good. I thank you for all that you're sharing. I wanted to just ask you this question. What are some common, maybe normal, what people would consider normal from a medical standpoint, or just interventions that can really destroy the immune system unintentionally? Obviously, nobody would intentionally want to do that. But what are some common things that we're doing? I think we touched on some of them as in our conversation with like excessive antibacterial kind of things. But what are some common interventions that people do to really wreak havoc on their immune system?
Medications is the biggest one. It is the biggest one. So there is a type of medication called a statin, and it's the most prescribed medication, second only, I guess, to antidepressants, which will have a similar effect. And a statin targets your cholesterol. Now, you need cholesterol, okay? So cholesterol wraps your nerves. It's like the nice fluffy coating around your nerves. It creates the myelin, and you make all your hormones post-menopause and post-andropause from cholesterol because you make them in your adrenals once you get older. Okay, so cholesterol is this wonderful thing, this wonderful substance. And when you have a overflourish of a viral load because it starts to steal that cholesterol. And some bacteria called gram-negative bacteria start to steal that cholesterol from around your nerves to wrap themselves in it so your immune system can't find them, right? Because the immune system doesn't want to attack the nerves. It sees the cholesterol coating and goes, right, I'll leave you alone. Cool, dude, stay there. So these viral particles and some bacteria will steal the cholesterol, wrap themselves in it so that they can stay alive so your immune system can't find them. Okay, but we're putting statins in. So we're reducing our cholesterol and we're seeing it as the bad guy.
Right.
And statins are having a massive effect worldwide on people's health. And even mainstream medical for years have been putting out studies saying statins are causing this, statins are doing that, and yet it's still so overly prescribed. So there's one idea of a medication, but there's tons of medications doing things like that. And so that's creating autoimmunity because our immune system cannot function. It's not seeing the general landscape that it usually sees. So there's one thing, we're eating things. You mentioned, the chlorine in water. So there's like a whole row on the periodic table of elements, and they're fluorine, iodine, chlorine, and bromine. Well, iodine is the good guy. The others are lighter, and so they have the same look as iodine does. So we're developing worldwide thyroid disorders because we're eating bread, we're drinking chlorinated water, and we're brushing our teeth with fluoride.
Yeah, which is a known neurotoxin. It's known. It's not even controversial. Fluoride is a neurotoxin.
Yeah.
Here in the United States, fluoride is added to the public water systems of these major cities here. It's a known neurotoxin. Again, we can go down that road, but it's like if nobody if you don't take responsibility for what you're ingesting, nobody's going to come do that for you. The government's not going to do it. Public health isn't going to do it. It has to be you, because even these are not even controversial topics. I know it may sound controversial. There's no controversy that fluoride is a neurotoxin.
No, it's out there.
It's out there, but it's still added to public water systems. And we think, oh, it's not enough to really affect you. Well, try ingesting poison just a little bit. We wouldn't say, yeah, there's a little bit of poison. I mean, the poison's deadly. It'll destroy your brain. But just get just a little bit every day is okay. It'd be fine.
Yeah.
No wonder after 50 years of that, 60 years of that, we're having neurological, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, all these kinds of things. And we don't, what's causing this? And nobody knows. And all the money's being reported into research. And it's, well, how about, first of all, removing what we know to be toxic in the water? I mean, that I know sounds very simple, but it's like you don't need a $1 billion grant to remove a known neurotoxin. You just remove it.
Exactly. And you just mentioned a couple of great points there. You know, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, these are immune-based reactions.
Sure.
So your immune system has been fighting for so long that it's now creating these conditions.
Totally. 100%.
So, you know, we look at medications, we can look at toxins, basically anything synthetic, if you're putting it into your body. Now, listeners, you know, I don't live like a monk. I eat a bit of junk food here and there with my kids. Like, you know, we live our lives.
Sure.
But, you know, only 5% of our intake will be junk food, if that. The rest is natural food, most of it that we grow ourselves.
Sure. And,
you know, so anything synthetic that you're putting in, your body does not understand what to do with it.
Totally.
Your body is designed to take in, you know, meats and fruits and vegetables and lots of color and things like that naturally. We're not talking about, you know, the Cheerios or the Fruit Loops or whatever you've got on your shelf, or the Zupa Duper Icy Poles that are, you know, all sorts of colors of the rainbow. And, you know, we're not designed to take something in a packet. We're designed to take something in a natural packet. So the apple has a skin, the banana has a skin, the egg has a shell, not, you know, a plastic that we then now can't break down and we're filling landfill with.
Totally. And a good rule of thumb, or people say it's a good rule of thumb, is if you, when you go to the grocery store, if it's not refrigerated, if it doesn't come from, you know, it's typically synthetic. If it comes in a box, a package, you know, that's not natural. Food comes from the earth, right? It grows, and there's a expiration date on it. It can't just sit on the shelves for days and days and weeks on end. It needs to be there needs to have some life in it, you know, and that's why we refrigerate it, right? Because it's still living to some degree. So if we're eating a live food, then obviously that's going to be good for the body and good for the health. And if we're eating food that is synthetic, then our bodies are amazing, but it's obviously, you know, we're polluting it, and you can only pollute it for so long before there's consequences from that. And so I guess a question I would like, maybe we can wrap up with this question, but for you would be, let's say people are listening to this, they've heard your story. What would be one piece of advice, a starting point for anybody that's listening to this? How can people start to take control of their health?
First of all, there's a couple of starting points. So on a really basic level, just say no to a lot of things. You learn the word, that's the first word you learn as a human baby. Anyone that's had kids will know that before mum and dad, it's no. That is the word that we seem to lose as we get older. So say no. Someone wants you to do something, just go, no, I need time to think about that. No, I need time to research that. No, this is my body.
Oh.
Even down to if your friends want you to go out somewhere and you're not feeling it, no, I'm busy.
Find your no.
Yeah, find your no. That's the first thing.
Wow.
The second thing is look for root cause. Nothing happens without a reason. Find the reason. And my team can certainly help you with that. We work with people all around the world because we are 100% remote. This whole pandemic thing going on, we closed our clinics and went remote, and that's been the silver lining for us, because now we all work when we want to work. And if the sun's shining and I know it's going to be shining because I look at the weather forecast, I'll be in my garden. I won't be working. So,
amazing.
Come to us or come to another holistic person and look for your root cause, because when you treat what the root cause is, everything else will fall in line.
Fantastic. Find your no, look for root causes. So good. So practical. And anybody can do this. Find your no, look for root causes.
Yep.
So I hope if you've heard nothing else today, hear that. Find your no, look for root causes. Okay, I got to ask.
It's okay to say no.
Totally.
I can't reiterate that enough. It's become such a dirty word as we get older that we all have to be, community minded and things. If you just don't feel like it, don't do it. Simple as that.
Which is listening, trusting your intuitive sense.
Yeah.
Learning to listen to that. So good. I have to ask you this. Is magic your given name from birth?
No. So when I was a teenager and I was really going through that self-destructive phase, I spoke to my grandfather and he said, well, I actually said you were magic when you were born.
Amazing.
And I went, oh, I might change my name. He goes, yeah, let's do it. So he was involved in that. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, the reason I ask is because, the word magic, people tend to use that word and they say, well, there's something that we can't explain, or there's something that goes beyond a perceived limitation. Some people call it a miracle, right? Or call it magic, kind of the same essence, right? This is this. But I feel like your life, it's a great name for you because your life has went way beyond any perceived limitation, right? It's just completely transcended it in your work, who you are, what you're doing in the world is people would look on and say, well, that's magic or that's a miracle. And
hey, I even say it about myself. I look now at where I was, even 7 years ago, 8 years ago, and I go, wow, look at all the magic that happened there.
Magic. Yeah. And I'm convinced that we're meant to live a life that people would say is magic. People would say is a miracle, because life is a miracle. It is magic. Like that's what we're,
exactly.
The
I'm named magic, but you're all magic.
Yes. So good.
You just got to find that.
Yeah, that's really good. Really good. Well, thank you, Magic, for your work and for your presence and who you are and what you're doing to help this world heal. Where can people get in touch with you, find out more about your work? Is there a website? Where can we?
So we're on Facebook at Holistic Natural Health Australia. Now, holistic has a W in front of it. So just remember that. We're also on Instagram at Holistic Natural Health, and our website is holisticnaturalhealth.com.au. So don't forget to put the W in front of holistic.
Holisticnaturalhealth.com.au.
Okay. And we do work worldwide.
Gotcha.com.au. So holisticnaturalhealth.com, holisticnaturalhealth.au for Australia. So fantastic.
So the whole website is holisticnaturalhealth.com.au. There is a holisticnaturalhealth.com, but that's someone else.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that clarification. Holisticnaturalhealth.com.au. Okay. Totally. That's good. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, for sharing your expertise and your life and your journey with us. So such a good conversation and very insightful and helpful. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And thank you guys for listening. And until next time, take care. Bye-bye.